Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vector Podcast. My name is Christian Perez. I'm the founder and CEO of Ultima Inc. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome onto the show Mr. Chris Lassiter. Mr. Lassiter, pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, thanks for inviting me here.
Absolutely. So, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
So I'm an active duty chief in the Navy. I've got about 17 months left before I retire, and I've been a web developer for about 15 years. And with a lot of these AI tools that have come out recently, I've started dabbling into the AI world, and AWS has been really my passion the last few years. And a matter of fact, that's how I ended up meeting you, is because I worked on a hackathon with AWS trying to get Lambda functions to work to generate a tool or something that someone could use using AI. And I ended up making VA Rating Assistant, which helps veterans with their VA rating. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm just really happy being here, and all these AI tools that are coming out it's just fantastic, and there's just so much we're going to be able to do with it here in the future.
So, AWS is Amazon Web Services, and they actually were hosting a hackathon, which, to be frank, I don't know about you, Chris. This was my first hackathon ever. I had no idea
Same.
really what to expect. So everything that I knew about hackathons was this is like, it can get pretty intense. And now, mind you, this is like before like a lot of like coding assistant tools and whatnot. And so one of the things that they were doing was hosting this serverless hackathon, which again, just to kind of give a little bit of background. So serverless essentially means that you don't actually have the servers of compute power local. You're essentially hosting it in the cloud. So these servers do exist, but you don't have to worry about maintaining them. You don't have to worry about anything that has to do with the actual server. You're basically just dealing with the services that they have. They scale virtually automatically. There's a lot that you pretty much relinquish to the AWS cloud so that they take care of it. So it's a phenomenal tool, and one that significantly reduces costs, especially for startups, or even not even startups. It could just be any company in particular that's just actively, looking for ways to still manage their compute, still run a lot of their applications, websites, so on and so forth. But they would prefer to do so without having to manage the actual hardware on premises. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about like what got you into primarily AWS?
Well, if you look at the U.S. government, you can see that they do a lot of cloud engineering with AWS and Microsoft. And so I've kind of, started peeking at Microsoft and AWS. And 2 years ago, I got picked up by a private company to be a cloud engineer for them based off my experiences with web development. And they ended up using AWS. And so it kind of pushed me toward learning it. And eventually, back in May, I just got certified as a cloud practitioner for AWS, and I'll be working here on my AI practitioner here soon. And I just loved it. There's just so much that you can do with it. And it's really fun. It's really friendly, hands-on. And there's just so many YouTube tutorials out there to be able to teach you on how to do everything.
That's awesome, man. And, I want to touch actually on the cloud practitioner and a lot of the certification and badges that actually AWS and a lot of other CSPs or cloud service providers actually offer, but primarily AWS in particular. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them? It's not a particularly easy thing to do. And certainly if anyone has those certifications, in my opinion, it definitely says, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's not just kind of showing up and saying that he knows a thing. He actually knows what he's talking about. What do you think?
No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, when it comes down to working inside of AWS, getting those badges and getting those certifications is completely different from being able to actually execute. Like for example, it took me, I worked on 3 months on my AWS Cloud Practitioner. Could I have finished it sooner? Yeah, probably. But what I ended up doing was when I didn't understand anything, I actually went into AWS. I was clicking, I was making projects and just trying to really understand, even though it's just the associate level or the practitioner level at this point. Getting hands-on really makes a difference. And I was talking to a hiring manager for AWS once, and he was saying, we have all these people, who have, 12, certifications, but they don't even know how to start an EC2 server. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
With AI out there, yeah, you can type in there and say, hey, do this. That's what I do every day. Do I know everything about coding? No, I'm not a coder. Technically, I guess they can call me a vibe coder. I'm hands-on inside AWS. I know, the best practices. I know the services that they have. I kind of know already, where I need to go. So basically kind of like an architect. And how to get there. And so I use AI as a tool in order to get me to those steps, to run the CLI commands. I've been vibe coding with Amazon Q for the last, gosh, I think about 40 hours the last like 6 or 7 days. When I made a VA rating assistant, I did 140 hours of vibe coding using the CLI through Amazon Q and Cursor. And just being able to just do everything from the CLI had just been, an eye opener to me. Even though in the beginning, before I did that, I was actually going in AWS and clicking on all the links and starting everything. And I think you still need to do that so you can really understand what the CLI is doing. So if you get stuck, you know how to go check logs without using the CLI and really understand the tools that you're using.
100%, man. So you touched on some really, really good points. Let's break it down a little bit for our viewers. When you're starting with AWS, a lot of the things that you want to do is build the things yourself, which is precisely what Chris is talking about. And I think that's a fantastic approach. Why? Because it forces you to, like he was saying, get really hands-on. But the biggest thing, I think the most important thing that you discussed there is having a solid understanding of the back end structure and the infrastructure, the architecture that goes into a lot of these services. As soon as coding was sort of unlocked to everyone, there was this and there still is a massive push to just code anything. But that really leaves the door open for a lot of security vulnerabilities and a lot of potential issues if you don't know what you're looking at on the back end and you don't know how to secure your EC2 instance or use any of those services that they actually have, like security services are incredibly important. So what do you think about vibe coding and sort of like, whatever stigma you think is there, if there is one, if you believe that there is one?
No, absolutely. I'm on a lot of the vibe coding pages on Facebook, and you can definitely see the difference between a vibe coder and a true developer. Someone who knows code in and out before AI was available. And, I understand the stigma that's behind it, but I just hope within like the next year or two that the negativity of someone saying I'm a vibe coder goes away, because I think vibe coding is fantastic. I think it is amazing because it can open up so many windows for people who just don't have the capability of understanding on how to write code from beginning to end. But for someone like me, who has been in this world for so long, I understand where I need to go from A to Z to have something secure, but I don't know how to type it. But I know how to name it to AI to get there. And just this morning, I saw someone writing back to somebody who said, oh my goodness, just like you said, someone pen tested my site and they were able to get all my users and their passwords and blah, 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 blah. And they started asking them, well, look, how did you vibe code it? They're like, oh, I did like 2 prompts and then I thought I was done. Well, you just can't do that.
Right.
Especially like with AWS, you got to make sure you have the correct subnets, the net gateways. Matter of fact, for the last 4 hours, I've been literally stuck in a loop with AI. And, anyone who's been using AI to code knows that happens a lot. And it ends up, what ended up happening was my subnets were fine. My net gateway was actually talking to another net gateway, and it wasn't supposed to do that. And so it took me to look at it and go, why is it doing this? But because my experience prior to AI, I was able to go, okay, something's wrong there, with the net gateway. It's not the subnets, and I was able to figure it out. Vibe coding, I think it's cool. I think it's a great thing, and I think if you use it right, there's so many tools out there to let people know how to do it correctly. And once people catch on how to do it right, there's going to be so many great things that are going to be built and secure.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more with you in that regard. And that's the one thing I definitely encourage vets, active duty service members, small business owners, anyone who's actually interested in really exploring AI in the realm of coding, and starting to pretty much tap into that sector. Definitely understand a lot of the back end that you're doing. Yeah, it's definitely like I think, like you said, Chris, it's definitely an iterative process. It's refining it. Executing and refining and further refining and further refining. Now, so clearly you're definitely well versed in the world of AWS, in the world of cloud infrastructure and cloud architecture. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with the AWS Lambda hackathon? How did you find out about that? What got you into it? And this is a perfect opportunity too for you to tell us about your project and what you built.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw an email come from DevPost, which is one of the websites that hosts hackathons. And so I decided to join it and kind of see what was available. And the biggest reason why I was on there was because I was using Bolt.new, which is basically another AI tool that you can use with single prompts to basically build you like a front end out of React. And that tool is just getting more powerful with connecting to Supabase. All of a sudden, Bolt releases this hackathon saying, hey, for $1 million in prizes, use Bolt.new to create something, and you got 30 days to do it. And at the end, you can meet all these criteria for all these prizes, and let's see who wins. And so I was like, oh man, I'm going to start using my vibe coding skills. I'm going to try this out. Well, I had an idea. I was like, I'm going to be retiring in 17 months. And one of the hardest things I see is for people to realize, what are all the medical issues that you have? What are all the evidence that you have? What's missing? The ECFR 38 talks about all the medical conditions. There's just so much going on there, and there's a lot of human error that can happen. So why don't we just use AI to help take out some of that human error? Do I think it's going to replace, the DAVs and the VAs who are there to help you? Absolutely not. I think what it'll do is it'll just help them find, more medical conditions or, the evidence to back that up a lot easier. And so what I thought of was VA Rating Assistant. So almost 60 days ago, I spent 145 hours of straight coding every day, 7 days a week. And, first off, I want to thank my wife and my kids for being patient, because I think I left the computer like maybe an hour a day, and they were, and ended up paying off because I ended up winning fourth place for the AWS Lambda hackathon. So what happened there was during the Bolt hackathon, AWS Lambda came out a couple days later and said, hey, use Lambda to create some functions, and we'll pay you some money if you win. And I was like, wait a minute. Well, I know AWS and I'm working on this. So I ended up doing 2 hackathons at the exact same time. And so what I ended up doing was using a lot of functions to be able to like run the AI searches and scan the ECFR 38 and pulling information back to the website, showing people what their conditions are based off their medical documents. And here, now I have VA Rating Assistant. Now it's still in beta. And I've actually worked on it a lot today. And I've got some awesome things that are coming out here soon. I'm hoping here by the beginning of September, we'll be able to fully launch it live. But being able to upload your medical documents, have it scan it, have it tell you, hey, here are all your medical conditions that we found. Here are all the evidence based off, the ECR 38, here's a recommended VA rating we think you can get for each of it. I mean, we're not a doctor, we're not the rating police, but this is what we think based off of documentation. You can print that out, take it to a VA rep and be like, hey, this is what I have. This is what, this is what I think we can do. Here's all the evidence. Some of the new tools that we're going to be adding to the site is, when you do your DBQs, we'll have all your medical information securely encrypted on the database, and you'll be able to pull that information, and I'm hoping it'll help fill out the forms automatically for you, because that's one of the most painful things is filling out all these VA forms. So if we already have the information, why don't we just use it to help you fill out the forms, or at least, or bring up like a PDF file to help you fill it out manually if we don't figure it out automatically. But what I can say is, because we are doing everything on AWS, I have followed all the norms and the practices for HIPAA and PI compliant, and I just signed an agreement a few days ago with AWS, and I'm proud to say that we are 100% compliant for 508, for HIPAA, for PII, and once we scan your files, within 24 hours, we delete those files, and everything stays encrypted on our database, which cannot be accessed outside the private subnets. And so it's just super secure. And I'm really proud of saying that. And it's been an awesome project. And I just cannot wait to continue adding amazing tools to this website to help myself and help other veterans.
That's fantastic, man. And I hope people really see your example, because at the end of the day, this is precisely what I think AI and coding can actually do is unlock this degree of potential, right? It's, it's going from, just having this sort of idea in your head and being able to actually bring it to life. That was, I mean, a project like that, how long do you think something like that, before the ubiquity of AI and how prevalent coding with coding assistants has actually become, how long do you think something like that would have actually taken somebody to sit there, code, and build a back-end infrastructure for? without using any of those tools?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So I actually talked to a couple developers, and they said it would have taken them at a minimum 6 months just to get everything connected before they even started testing for errors and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking anywhere between 6 to 9 months just to do what I did in 145 hours.
See, and that's huge. That's huge because it literally, I mean, you're not talking about cutting corners. You're talking about
Yep.
expediting processes that would have otherwise taken months to do. And I want to point out one thing too, because I think one of the things that goes sort of unspoken is there has to be a certain degree of subject matter expertise. And I think that this is where AI primarily thrives. You have to have a sort of human nuanced understanding of what it is that you're getting into before you start building some of these AI tools. There's still sort of that degree of responsibility wherein it's incumbent on you to become a subject matter expert on the thing that you actually want to dive into, because the more expertise that you can provide to those foundation models and those LLMs, the infinitely better degree of output that you're going to get. So what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a word called for it. It's called prompt engineering. Really, I think prompt engineering is one of those words that's going to replace the vibe coder or make the difference between a vibe coder. Prompt engineer is someone who can definitely go into an AI tool and, do the research, get the prompts in there, get the documents in there that you need, set it up to the way that you need so you can have, a project rule document, a PRD ready. And so when you get in there, it's basically having like a bunch of engineers who have all the answers already. And when you say go, it can create you something, and it can be pretty successful from the beginning. You nailed it. Prompt engineering is key nowadays.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So now, what are sort of your aspirations with regards to this? So where do you see this? Where do you see the opportunity for growth in what you're doing? And essentially, how would you like this tool to be used by veteran service members, and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So my long game for this is to eventually get it to the point to where I can reach out to the VA and to DAV and VA companies and be like, listen, I've got this fantastic tool that you guys can purchase, and I can terraform it. So when they go to launch it, they can have their own engineers, tweak it to the way they need it. But basically it'll work out of the box. And so instead of coming to me and paying to use the scanning services, you're still going to these organizations that are free, and they're paying to use the services to help them out. And that's what I want. When you come to my site, there's a lot of tools that you can use for free, but to actually be able to use the scanning tool to scan your documents and get your estimated VA rating, that costs me money. So that's going to have to cost the veteran money. It's a low amount. But at the end of the day, it would be nice to get it out to those organizations that can still help vets for free and allow them to use the tool. One tool though I haven't mentioned yet that is on the site, and it's really one of my most favorite features is our VA chatbot. It has been specifically trained with the ECFR 38, and I tell you, if you go to VARatingAssistant.com and you click on the right-hand side on that chatbot and you ask it questions about the rating, about, hey, I've got these symptoms, what do I need to look for? What documents do I need? We're connected to the VA's API for documents, so it brings up the documents that you need. It also does it in the chat too. It is just a fantastic tool. It's basically having a DAV or a VA rep right there who can answer those questions right away for you. Like I said, it doesn't replace the human, but it gives you the tools to take to the people who are the expert to make sure that you are ready when you get to your VA appointments. You go in there with all the documentation filled out correctly, and you can get that rating that you deserve. And that's what I'm proud that we're making.
That's awesome, man. And I really hope that if you're watching this, I hope you're taking notes, because some of the things that Chris has been talking about here are just they're very principled and very well built. When you talk about Terraform, we're talking about infrastructure as code. Look into that. That is the way to basically build enterprise grade that you can just put out there, and like he said, is ready out of the box. We're talking about APIs, tapping into the VA's API. I mean, these are robust systems that you don't just the VA's API on your app. Like there's some back end work that has to get done in order for that to successfully and securely run. So I really hope that the audience here is listening to you, is really taking notes about the things that you're saying, because what you're providing is, I think, invaluable insight into how to properly build a lot of these apps. And, I think you brought up a point with regards to cost, right? And this is one of those places where it can get a little bit tricky sometimes, right? Because like you mentioned, it does cost money to run a lot of this these programs. It's these things, yeah, they're built on the cloud, and you're definitely significantly reduced in cost when you run them a certain way, but they're certainly not free. And especially once you start talking about running chatbots and running LLMs and tapping into APIs and processing all these documents, I mean, it can get if left untethered, it can very quickly spike in cost. So when it comes to cost management, what are some of the tools that you've used in order to make sure that you can still build these tools in as cost effective a manner as you possibly can?
Yeah, absolutely. And scaling it was the key word that you said right there. So I'll give you an example. So one of the tools that we use is AWS Text Extract. And it has the ability to scan documents, recognize signatures, recognize forms, analyze those forms and tables. But it also has the ability to just use the API just to focus on the text itself and then extract it. And in the beginning, before I realized the best practices, I actually allowed AWS Text Extract to just run free with its API. And I ended up getting charged a couple of $100 for just a couple hundred pages of documents, and ouch, that hurt. And so I went and looked at best practices, and then Amazon Q came out, and I was like, okay, hey, listen, let's look into the API and see what we can do. And that's when I realized if I scaled it back and only used the simple text scanning, because it still grabs all the text, it just doesn't organize it out of the tables and forms. But that's why we can use the AWS what is it, comprehend medical comprehend, something like that, and it can definitely pull that information out of that text and then use the RAG connected to the ECFR 38 and then bring that back. And so I was still able to do everything I wanted to do by using best practices, scaling it back, and it cut the price by 97.5%. Blew my mind. And because I was able to scale that back and scale that price back, it is now going to be cheaper for veterans.
Right. And I think, and that's the goal, right? That's the ideal. What problem does VA Rating Assistant solve if you had to say it in sort of like an extended elevator pitch, if you will?
Oh, wow, an elevator pitch. I haven't thought about that one yet. So basically, VA Rating Assistant, right now, the VA is processing about 2 million claims a year. And I think we can get that to double, using VARatingAssistant.com, because what it can do is it can take that human factor of missing, the data, incorrect, not filling out the DBQs correctly, and just really cut that by 90%. And so when someone shows up and says, hey, I've been to VARatingAssistant.com, this is what it says my evidence is, this is what it says all my medical concerns. Can you please look over my paperwork? You still use that human factor to make sure, everything looks correct. And then they go, yeah, I think that's it. And then they get it off to the VA and bam, no errors. And you don't have anything returned. I actually am talking to someone who works at the VA through a neutral friend. And she said one of the biggest things is returning documentations because they didn't fill it out correctly. And then, then that takes it just months to get back to them. And then you get, you wait line again. But just imagine if, a year from now, the VA starts getting all this documentation that's bam, bam, bam. It's correct. It's filled out. It has everything they need. The evidence backs it up, the cause and the effect. And then they can just start issuing out, these paychecks to these veterans because all the paperwork is correct. That's what I'm here to do, is to make sure that the veterans get what they deserve, to do it in a timely manner, and to make sure any of these veterans who may be homeless because they're waiting for their VA checks, we can get them off the streets too. It's just going to help so many veterans.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of your top 3 AI tools? And we'll do one that you think basically every veteran service member or, just small business owners should absolutely get into and start using right off the bat. And then just 2 of, your sort of your favorites, just the ones that have been absolute game changers for you that you've just thoroughly enjoyed using.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say 2 of them for the first one. So, ChatGPT And then when you're inside of Gmail, they now use Google Gemini to help write emails. I think we're in the future now to where if you are writing emails to people, if you're not saying help me write this after you're done typing, to reformat it to make it sound professional or to even make it sound better, I think you're not utilizing all the tools that are available out there. And then of course ChatGPT. I mean, it's a powerful tool. I think it can be used really well with students. They have a new mode on there that won't necessarily give them the answers, but it'll help them walk it through the steps to get to the answer. And I think it's a fantastic tool. And then, of course, for adults, if you're using it to research anything, it's a fantastic tool to use. And then my two favorite tools that I'm using right now is I'm using Cursor to do all my coding, and then of course Amazon Q. I mean, Amazon Q is basically it's like an IDE, integrated development environment inside of Cursor, to where it connects directly to your AWS, and it can do so much for you. It's just so powerful. And those are really my two favorite tools that I'm using right now.
That's awesome, man. Well, Chris, I really appreciate all the insight that you provided. I hope a lot of folks will listen to your projects and your tips for success, and we'll start practicing some of these things and sort of bringing their ideas out into the world and really building these incredible tools that folks like yourself are already building. So, in closing, why don't you tell us where we can find you and how other folks can get in touch with you, as inevitably, I know for a fact there will be people interested in a lot of the things that you're building now.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just go to LinkedIn and type in Christopher Lassiter, you'll be able to find me there. You're more than welcome to make a connection. And then if you go to VARatingassistant.com, you can hit me up through the contact form, and we'll respond to you pretty quickly. And like I said, the AI bot is up and running. It's a very powerful tool when it comes to asking questions about VA rating and just getting assistance, any really medical questions that you have. And, I'm really happy that we sat down, we talked about this, and I hope to see a lot of people using it here in the future.
That's wonderful, man. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mr. Chris Lassiter, the creator of VA Rating Assistant. Go check out his LinkedIn, go check out his projects. And this has been the Vector Podcast. I will see you guys later.